Welcome back. You're watching CNN Newsroom. I'm Linda Kincaid. The mayor of Kyiv says at least 4 people were killed, 20 others wounded in Russian strikes overnight. Search and rescue operations are ongoing in the Ukrainian capital. Russia launched ballistic missiles and drones in the early hours of Friday morning. Ukrainian officials accused Russia of targeting residential areas of Kyiv. It's unclear if this is the retaliation Moscow warned about after Ukrainian drones struck Russian airfields and warplanes. I'm joined now by Ambassador William Taylor. He is the former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine and a distinguished fellow at the Atlantic Council. Good to have you with us, Ambassador.
Linda, it's good to be here.
So just a day after President Trump warned that he had this call with Vladimir Putin and that Vladimir Putin said he would retaliate for Ukraine's drone attack, we're now seeing this ballistic missile attack by Moscow on Kyiv. From your contacts on the ground, what are you hearing about the scope and the impact of these strikes?
Well, Linda, these strikes are part of a long series of attacks that the Russians have mounted against Ukrainians, against civilians, let's point out. They've attacked apartment buildings just in this particular attack. But these attacks are what the Ukrainians are now sadly used to. I got back from Odessa a couple of days ago. I got back from Kyiv about 3 weeks ago. We spent a lot of time in bomb shelters, and the Ukrainians spent since the last 3 years, Linda, as you know, more than 3 years, the Russians have been bombing. So these are to be expected. This is what they've grown to have to live with.
Yeah, and that's where many Ukrainians in the capital are tonight, in bomb shelters. But I want to ask you about Ukraine's drone attack deep inside Russian territory on those military air bases and that strike on the Kerch Bridge, which of course is a vital supply route to Crimea. How does that demonstrate a shift in strategy? And is Ukraine gaining leverage or taking major risks?
Absolutely gaining leverage. Ukraine's demonstrating that, in President Trump's words, they've got cards. They've got the capabilities to go deep against military targets. That, again, we should be very clear that the Ukrainians are going after military airfields and military aircraft. And they're not going after civilian targets like the Russians do. The Russians bomb civilian targets, and the Ukrainians go after military targets. And the Kerch Bridge, as you just pointed out, is a military supply route. So the Ukrainians are demonstrating that they've got capabilities, they've got determination, they've got the technology, they've got the will to continue this fight and indeed to win this fight.
Yeah. I want to ask you about Trump's comments in the White House, where he said it might be better to let Ukraine and Russia fight it out for a while. He described these two leaders, these two nations, as if they were kids fighting before stepping in to broker any sort of peace. From your perspective, what's the logic, if any, behind that approach?
So, Linda, President Trump does have leverage. He has the ability, he has shown the ability to get them together, to get the Ukrainians and Russians actually talking. The Ukrainians have been very cooperative about these conversations, these negotiations. The Russians less so. The Russians have turned down President Trump's proposal for a 30-day ceasefire, air, land, and sea. The Ukrainians agreed, and Trump said no. This falls into a pattern. What President Trump said today falls into a pattern of letting the Russians get off the hook, letting the Russians continue the fight, letting the Russians continue to bombard the Ukrainians. This is what's been happening, and President Trump's giving him some more time now throughout the summer. Time is not on the side of peace. If we want to get to a ceasefire, it has to be now, and the pressure from President Trump, who has leverage, has to be on President Putin.
And how should NATO interpret those sort of comments from Donald Trump, who seems to see a prolonged fighting as a strategy that's potentially useful?
So the NATO nations, the European NATO nations, are actually stepping up. They are listening to what President Trump says. They are observing what President Trump's defense secretary has been doing that is not showing up at some of these conversations about how to support Ukraine. And the European members of NATO are stepping up to provide more weapons, more support. Europeans are even talking seriously still about deploying a military force in Ukraine to enforce a ceasefire. So the Europeans are stepping up. The European members of NATO are making some real pledges and actually taking some actions to support Ukraine, even as the Americans hesitate to do so.
Former Ambassador William Taylor, good to get your analysis. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Linda.
Well, the bromance between Donald Trump and Elon Musk has turned into a nasty public showdown, with the two billionaires embroiled in a vindictive divorce. The US president has threatened to slash Musk's huge government contracts, to which the Tesla CEO replied, "Go ahead, make my day." Well, the growing animosity stems from deep disagreements over the congressional spending bill. Musk claims it is filled with, quote, "a mountain of disgusting pork." But President Trump insists that it is big and beautiful.
I'd rather have him criticize me than the bill, because the bill is incredible. It's the biggest cut in the history of our country. We've never cut. It's about $1.6 trillion in cuts.